Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, July 6th, 2020. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr, and today I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman. He's the lead beat writer for BuckeyeScoop.com. Tony wrote about several different topics over the holiday weekend that I thought our listeners would probably find interesting. Wanted to have him on, just in case you were doing something other than reading the internet all weekend. That's okay. We're going to start with probably the least fun, but possibly most important one for the 2020 college football season. The NCAA's chief medical officer, as well as Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott, shared their thoughts on the pandemic and its potential impact on the 2020 season. Tony, what did they have to say about where things stand right now?
Where things stand right now is kind of like a bunch of the country where you're in a standstill, but time keeps moving. So you can only stand still for so long before your drop dead date is here. And Larry Scott he said he didn't even want to give a date as to like when things need to be like some cutoff date or anything like that in terms of moving forward or not moving forward, because he's kind of, I guess, afraid of putting something out there like that. But Brian Hainline said like the key date would be July 13th for people to keep in mind, because that's when the voluntary workouts end and the mandatory stuff begins. That's with the 10 days quote unquote spring period that teams will get. And he said you just watch that, see how things go. Things are going really well in some parts of the country in terms of the athletic departments. Michigan tested 260 some people, and only 2 tested positive for COVID recently. And we know some areas are doing better than others. Some schools are doing better than others. But what they had to say was these next couple of weeks are going to be critical in terms of whether or not we will have not just college football, but any kind of college sports this fall.
There's been a lot of talk about potentially moving the season to the spring as a plan B. What did they have to say about that idea?
Yeah, Hainline pretty much dismissed it out of hand, as if he said to think that what's going to happen in the spring when you don't even know what's going to happen in August. It makes no more sense to say let's play in the spring than it does to say let's play right now or let's play like next July. So they're planning to play as the season will start in early September 5th, the first weekend or whatever, and then you just move forward. That's what the plan is. And you take each day as it comes, and if something changes or a state shuts down or a school decides we're going to back out, then you deal with that as it comes. But you think, let's just go and let's just move everything, and we'll start in January or February, and that's when we'll start. You have no idea what that's going to look like as well. Forget the fact that you're asking then college students to play 2 seasons in 1 year, which, if we're talking about protecting the players and player safety, that to me is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of complications, and I've read people talking about the fact that if you play in the spring, you may have to slowly start sliding the schedule back towards a normal fall. But if you start in February of 2021, then the 2022 season might have to start in January of 2022, and then December of 2022, or whatever.
It might take like 5 years to get back on track.
Yeah. So yeah, that's not necessarily as clean and easy a solution as I think some people are thinking. So I think we're all hoping for a season in some form or fashion. What did they suggest people could do right now to help with that?
Well, and you're seeing it on Ohio State social media and so many other schools' social media. They're just asking people wear masks, wash your hands, maintain social distancing, the basic tenets of everything that we've heard from the medical professionals. Basically the Buckeye pledge. They're saying maybe go ahead and wash your hands and wear your masks and just try to be considerate of others and realize that it's okay to wear a mask. And if you don't wear a mask, then there may not be football. And you've seen it from Gene Smith. You've seen it from all of the Ohio State coaches. They're imploring fans on social media, and Ohio State is not the only school to do that. Just basically take part in making sure the season happens. And they're asking people just to do your part, and your part being wear a mask and wash your hands, basically.
On a much more upbeat note, you also wrote about the Buckeyes' stellar class of freshman receivers. That's a topic we've discussed quite a bit on the Buckeye Weekly podcast over the past few months. Several of those guys have said their goal is to leave as the greatest receiver class in school history. So is that realistic? And if it is going to happen, what would that start to look like this fall?
So I wrote about that and looked at other Ohio State receiver classes that would compare or that produced big numbers. And you go to the 2011 class with Michael Thomas and Devin Smith and Evan Spencer, and they produced pretty well, I think around 5,000 yards. But the best one was the 2014 class with Terry McLaurin, Johnny Dixon, Paris Campbell, Noah Brown, and Curtis Samuel. They almost like 5,700 yards receiving and another 16 or 1,800 yards rushing, mostly due to Curtis Samuel, but also Paris Campbell in there. So when you think of, yes, they are this group, this 2020 group is the most highly touted, without doubt, recruiting class of receivers in Ohio State history. You got four receivers in the top 16 of their position, 2 5-star guys, all 4 top 100 guys. But they need to obviously produce to become what they want. That's understood. But I wanted to see, like, well, what would that be? What would that look like? And Tom, you say, what would that look like this year? Remember, like, only Curtis Samuel produced as a true freshman of that group, and he was at running back. So none of those guys really did any receiving until Curtis Samuel was a sophomore, and he was splitting time with Braxton Miller. It wasn't until the third year for all of those guys when things really blossomed. That's when that was the 2016 season where Curtis Samuel's 74 catches and Paris Campbell and Johnny Dixon and those guys just started becoming more of a part of the offense. Not even Johnny Dixon. He came in 2017 and 2018. But if they're already doing some things this year, and it looks like they probably will given the depth chart, they're going to have a really good chance to leave here bettering those numbers with just the 4 of them, knowing that, if they are doing well, they're going to have to do it in 3 years. But the 2014 class essentially did it in 3 years as well. It was just the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year of their respective careers.
Yeah, that's worth sort of reiterating. I think there is a lot of hype around these guys, and I think you and I are probably guilty to some degree of looking at practice number 1 of the spring and go, kind of wiggling our eyebrows a little bit and going, yeah, there might be something here. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think we're both guilty on that front. G. Scott, I think we're both guilty on that front. Julian Fleming, I think we've talked up a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
Mookie Cooper's the one I think that both of us probably think might have a year just because of depth chart. He may just be buried at H on the depth chart. But, yeah, I think it's worth reiterating. Michael Thomas didn't do anything his freshman year and then redshirted his sophomore year. He turned out okay. Paris Campbell went, 3 seasons without a catch? It was like his 4th season before he had a reception. Terry McLaurin didn't do much of anything for a few years. I mean, you can't get too hung up on this guy's a bust if he doesn't do anything as a true freshman. Not everyone is going to be Chris Olave.
Mm-hmm.
1 or 2 of them could be Chris Olave, but not everyone is going to be Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson. So just keep that in mind. You got to be a little bit patient, but yeah, the source material is there for this to be the greatest class in Ohio State receiver history, but you may have to wait a year or 2 to see it on the field.
And even Chris Olave had to wait a half a season before he was really and to wait for an injury to happen before he was really got to play much.
Yep. So we'll wrap up with the latest story in your season preview series. We're talking Buffalo Bulls. You are going from the least imposing Ohio State opponents to the most imposing. And this is worth noting. Buffalo comes in after 2 Big Ten East teams. So this is not going to be a total walkover this year. The Bulls lose 3 starters on their offensive line, but have basically just about everyone else back. What do you expect to see from them this fall?
And, I feel kind of bad putting them at 9 when they're still Illinois and teams like that. But that Illinois game is at Illinois in November, and who knows what that's never a fun place to play. So Buffalo at home in September, I think will be a little bit easier. But their key guy is Jarrett Patterson, their running back, redshirt junior, rushed for 1,799 yards last year, rushed for 1,000 yards as a redshirt freshman. He's got a teammate who also rushed for 1,000 yards last year. So that's Lance Leipold came over from Wisconsin Whitewater after, I think 722 national titles in D3, splitting them with Mount Union every other year. But so they've got that running game going, but they, like you said, they do need to find an offensive. They've got to get the offensive line to gel. They have two quarterbacks who started last year, lost their initial starter to an injury. So it will be interesting to see how that develops in fall camp. Defensively, they've got the two best defensive ends in the MAC, two guys that led the league in sacks last year. They're returning, all three linebackers and a corner and a safety, all back. So they've got the culture now. They've got the program built, and now they've got veterans who from like the 2017 class that have all kind of gelled together. And so they've got a veteran team who now knows what it's like to win. And you're looking at a team that could, 9-10 wins. I have them opening the season with a win at Kansas State. I don't think that's outrageous.
Kansas State, I believe, if I remember correctly, loses all of their offensive linemen. They're replacing all 5 offensive linemen. So
like
for a
two
team
starters
that
on offense.
for a team that likes to run the ball like that, that's a little bit of a red flag. So yeah, Lance Leipold is one of those. Just keep an eye on him. Some Power 5 team is gonna hire him in a year or two, and they're gonna go. Him and Chris Creighton are the two. Chris Creighton from Eastern Michigan. Those are the two guys in the MAC that are just keep an eye on them. And maybe Sean Lewis from Kent State. I spend a lot of time thinking about the MAC. I don't know why. Doesn't matter.
Real quick, one of my prediction for Buffalo was that this would be Lance Leipold's last year, and he's 55, which is kind of old in terms of like going up to the next level of a program. But if, say, Minnesota loses PJ Fleck, is that a guy that he's from that general area of the country? That might not be a bad way to go when you've got that culture already built. He doesn't have to rebuild. If you could rebuild Buffalo, not even rebuild, because what's it ever been? Like, he built Buffalo up, and I think you give him a program that is already on the way up, and it might just be a smooth takeoff.
Yeah, he was someone who I put his name out there when after Rutgers fired Chris Ash last year as someone who, you want someone who is not going to be overwhelmed with a complete rebuilding from scrap job. He would not have been a bad choice for Rutgers. Yeah, he seems like someone who you could give him just about any Power 5 program, and I'd say it's at least 50-50 that they're in a bowl in the first 2 to 3 years, almost no matter which program it is. But yeah, that'll be an interesting game for Ohio State. Speaking of not writing people off too early in their careers, listen, if a Buffalo defensive end gets a sack or two, do not write off. We've learned the Khalil Mack, Taylor Decker lesson, I think, friends. Let's be a little bit patient there. But if there's a season, that's a win in and of itself. So, Tony, thank you for joining us. Make sure you check out BuckeyesScoop.com to find all of Tony's reporting, plus some other great content, including an interesting look at some of the top 2023 football prospects in the state of Ohio. Our Mick Walker wrote that this weekend. Lots of great insider content as well. That's content on the front page, and also content on the Ask the Insiders board. That is all available on BuckeyesScoop.com. Tony does a chat every Tuesday. That is an Ask the Insiders. That's a members-only feature. Tony, want to let people know kind of what to expect with your Tuesday chats?
It's kind of like when any of us do a chat, it's whatever, whatever you want to talk about. Yeah, it's mostly Ohio State centric, but we'll get into TV, food, movies, any sort of thing. And basically, as we build this community, we want people to know that we're all there. Just we're there in on message board, hanging out, wanting to chat, wanting to talk with people. And so that's what that Tuesday is. It's questions come in all day, and then I'll sit down usually after dinner and get to it. It's not quite like the Bill Green all day marathon on Thursdays where he is just there all day, and that thing will go 20 pages deep.
Yeah, those are some of my favorite things on the site are those chat sessions. We've got one going several times a week with our staff, and it's always interesting because some of us will jump in on that Bill Green chat because it's like, well, he's got 150 questions. I'm sure he won't mind if we answer a few. So you end up interacting with multiple members of the staff, getting different opinions on things. I saw Russ Fulton in there last week. You were in there last week. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. If you want to be a part of any of those, you can just sign up at BuckeyesScoop.com to be part of our members section. You can, again, do that at buckeyescoop.com. Thank you guys for listening. Really appreciate it. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. All of the Buckeye Scoop podcasts are there. Just search Buckeye Scoop. While you're there, you can subscribe to get them downloaded directly to your phone. You can also rate and review us there. We ask you to do that when you get a chance. Thank you guys for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.